Go on.
You mentioned so you mentioned hanging, bringing back hanging.
Yep.
Essentially bringing in the death penalty.
Yes.
That can be quite a tough pill to swallow for a lot of voters.
Yeah.
How would you ease that into the political sphere?
I actually think if you put it to a vote, most people would support the death penalty for certain crimes. Now, the only difference is, I'm saying that the death penalty should only operate inside the prison. Only existing prisoners can qualify for the death penalty. And that one of the reasons why a prisoner could be hanged is for being an Islamist ringleader. You might also want to include that people that rape inside prison, because that happens as well. So that's my answer. And I actually think that a lot of people might support that.
So what you're saying then is that them that's been punished are still doing the worst of the worst, and they just need rid of, basically.
What I'm saying is we need a prison system. We need to reform our prison system so that our prison system is actually trying to reform prisoners. But the point about liberals is that they don't understand what reformation means. They don't understand what metanoia means, what repentance means. They think reformation is teaching a radical how to use a hammer, a chisel, a knife, and a saw, and then sending them back into society with new ways to kill people. Because you've given them some new skills, but you haven't changed the way they think. Anyone who's had any experience in the army knows that the army uses pressure to change people, to change people's way of thinking. Prisoners are full of tough nuts. It needs to use pressure to change people. Pressure from the screws, pressure from the state backing certain evangelists, pressure from serious punishment for being on the wrong side of the line. I'm not a soy liberal, which means that I can think of solutions that are outside of the liberal box, that a liberal might find hard to swallow. If we create an environment that's tough enough, where the way to get out of the tough spot is to become a Christian, then you're going to see a lot more people becoming Christian. And then you can examine how genuine that conversion is over time. And if you don't think it's genuine, you don't have to factor it in to a principle of early release. You can just let them live out their sentence in peace. But those that are spreading Islamist radical teaching in our prison need to be so scared of the consequences that they would only dare tremble it in a whisper. Whereas right now, what they do is they run around in a big gang, they beat the shit up out of people, knowing that there's not going to be any consequences. They tell prisoners, you've got an appointment tomorrow with 12 of us, and we're going to tell you why Islam's great, and then we're going to ask you at the end in a very clear way about what answer to give, about whether you agree about whether Islam is great. Of course you're going to say yes, and then they're going to say, well, does that mean you want to become a Muslim then? And of course, every weak man who doesn't want to get beat up by a mob of 12 takes his shahada, because that's what pussies do in prison. But, ladies and gentlemen, if it was the case that those 12 men knew that the screws could kick the shit out of them, and that they would all be hanged the next day for trying to do what they were going to do, they wouldn't dare do it. You know why? Because that's what pussies do in prison. So, ladies and gentlemen, the way you deal with bullies is you bully them. And what we've got to do as a society is stop bullying our Islamist bullies. And that needs to come from the state. Any other questions?
question for you on my favourite subject, as you know. I'm currently on Tommy Robinson.
Sorry, questions on the topic.
It is on the topic.
Oh, all right, fair enough.
No.
That was a good catch.
I definitely caught you out there.
All right.
I'm currently on Tommy Robinson.
Making loads of assumptions today.
And Tommy is currently in prison as
Yeah.
a civil prisoner.
Yeah.
And what's your views on the fact that he's in solitary confinement?
I'm sorry, bro, that's not actually on topic. I'll take questions at the end generally, but I just want questions on the topic of Islamist gangs operating in our prisons and our responsibility to Christian prisoners. Any other questions?
So since the state isn't involved in protecting Christians, what can Christians do if we find ourselves in prison?
You've got to form a gang. That is the only realistic option. It is the only realistic option, and then the prisoners themselves force the segregation. Because nothing will happen until it is forced. That isn't because I want that to be the situation. I'm just answering the question realistically. The prison service is underfunded, it's recruiting the wrong people, and the people that it's got haven't got the right experience or even sometimes the right motivation to protect Christian prisoners from this kind of harassment. So when the state fails, the church steps in. We do that with food banks and nobody's got a problem with it. We do that with Christian charities, nobody's got a problem with it. So why don't we do that on questions of security?
So as a Christian gang,
Let someone else ask a question. Any other questions? Islamist gangs in prison and the church in prison.
I suppose gangs and Christians, the two don't synchronise, do they?
The idea that gangs don't synchronize in prison. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a gang, but you'll often find that gangs think of their other gang mates as a family. It's often like a family-run business. They operate like a family-run business. They feel a close brotherhood to one another, a close solidarity for one another. Gang members who are really involved in their gang are willing to die for one another, fight for one another, lie for one another, steal for one another. I'm not validating those negative outworkings, but are we saying that to be Christian isn't about solidarity, isn't about standing up for one another, isn't about protecting one another, isn't about caring for one another as a family? The reality is, we might want to call it a different name, but gangs and the church do have some synchronicity at certain levels of interface. Obviously, I'm not supporting the idea of Christian gangs going round beating people up willy-nilly to try and dominate. That would be unchivalrous. And a Christian man should be guided by the code of chivalry, which means you protect the weak. And if that weak man is another prisoner who's not a Christian, then you protect him from the Islamist gangs. Or maybe it's a Muslim that wants out of the Islamist gangs, and you take him under your shoulder. Christian gangs would be different from Islamist gangs because Christians are guided by principles of faith, love, and hope. Not dominance, supremacy, and apartheid. And so, if a Christian gang was operating by Christian values in the prison system, it would actually bring, I suspect, increased security, increased harmony, and increased stability to the prison system. Bearing in mind a Christian submits to the authority of the state.
Can you give us an example of a Christian gang?
So,
That's good.
let me finish. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not saying that this is the ideal situation. The ideal situation would be that the state gets hold of the prison system. But the truth is, right now, the state has lost control of the prison system, and our brothers and sisters are being harmed inside the prisons. And we should not ignore them just because they ended up in there because of some sin. Next question. Yep. Wait, did you ask the last one?
Yes.
No, wait, let someone else ask one.
It's related to your last point.
Let someone else ask the question.
Someone asked, I don't think he's here now, and give an example of a Christian gang.
Right, I don't have an example of a Christian gang. I don't think this has ever been thought of before or even discussed, because in the past maybe we never had to. But we've got to answer the question of how do we guarantee the security of Christians in prison when the state is not guaranteeing the security of Christians in prison? Let me ask you this question. If the state was not guaranteeing the security of your family, what would you do about it? If you knew that the state would not be there to protect your family, what would you do? And would you expect anyone to blame you for doing it? Well, aren't Christians a family to one another? Isn't that our family inside prison? Aren't they a family to one another? So shouldn't they organise to protect themselves? And if that is called a gang, then so be it. I would prefer it happen another way. I would prefer a competent government. I would prefer competent prison guards. But the truth is, we have neither. And so we must organise our own means of security within the law. Now, I don't know if gangs are legal or illegal inside the prison system. But people can't be stopped from just standing up for one another. And Christians should stand up for one another wherever they are in the world, and that includes inside prison. Next question. Now you can ask.
You've missed out the violence part.
So,
You're gonna meet violence with violence at the end of the day. And therefore, once violence is meted out in response to these Muslim gangs, what's the response of the state on the Christian gangs?
right.
You know the answer. You know the answer. We never.
So, ladies and gentlemen, because of this Islamist violence inside of our prisons, if Christians started to defend themselves, here is exactly what would happen. The same has happened in Northern Ireland. The groups would simply be separated. And if the groups were separated, could the Islamists attack non-Muslims? Would the problem be solved? There you go. The state will not act because it is incompetently led, and it will not act until its arm is forced behind its back. That is a sad situation, but that is the situation that we're in. The point remains, for those that say, but what, these are Christians fighting. Well, let me ask you, if someone attacked your family, would you defend them? The law says that it is legal to defend yourself, including inside prison. Yes, there's a legal threshold, and so as Christians we should educate Christian prisoners about that threshold, because as Christians we should try to keep to the laws of the land. But when the state itself is not enforcing its own laws, as it is increasingly doing on a range of issues, then that means it places citizens in situations where they're forced to act because the state is not doing its job. Christians in prison need to be protected from Islamist gangs. And there's only two ways that is going to happen. They are either protected by the state or they protect themselves. And it is not a crime morally or legally to protect yourself from Islamist gangs. Right. Well, it already is happening out here. It's not a foreshadow, it is happening. The Islamists in this park tried for 4 years to bully all of us out. They tried intimidating us. They tried attacking us. They tried stabbing us. They prepared to come with assault rifles and shoot us. They tried to set us on fire. These are all real incidents. They tried sexually assaulting the Christian sisters. They racially abused us. They lied about us. They tried for 6 years to bully the Christians out of this park, and they failed. Because we Christians are not going to be intimidated by these Islamists. But the problem is, and the problem that you all need to recognize, is that with sufficient numbers, they'll just ratchet it up. So as a country, we have to make a choice. Do we crack down on them, or do we allow them to continue to build up their networks, to push their ideology? The state has to make a choice. Liberalism has failed. The state must choose to be an avowed muscular Christian state, and it must deal with the Islamists at the state level, with deportations, with hanging, with making them outlaws. The state and every country that cracks down on the Islamists always sends them running. You know why? Because the lions of Islam are only lions when they're killing the unarmed women and children. They're never tough when it comes to fighting armed men. They're always cowards and they always lose. They're not strong except by your weakness of mind, your weakness of heart, your weakness of strength. That's how you win. But right now, we're all separated. The state is cowering in a corner saying, please don't bully me. I'll be nice. I'll chuck you things in the hope of placating this growing existential threat. And all the while, the Islamists take what you give them and then demand more. How about we just ban halal? Or ban the adhan being blasted by a megaphone from the minaret? How about we say that pushing Islam is a prisonable offense? Because, make no mistake about it, under Sharia law, that's what they will do to Christians. So they'll complain it's Islamophobia when we suggest to do it to them, but they will want to do it to us. And the thing is, a lot of us are not awake to that fact. A lot of us are still daydreaming that we live in this fair play society. They're not playing fair. You need to recognize that. They're not playing by your liberal rule book. You need to recognize that. They're not people that can be bartered with or traded off. You either crush them or they crush you. I, for one, will not be a dhimmi. So that kind of tells you what my choice is. Yeah? And we do it legally. We use the law. We use the state to do it. So, any other questions?
Is this situation that's happening where Muslims are Muslims in prison?
Sorry?
This situation that's happening in the UK where Muslims are converting non-Muslims to Muslim Islam.
Yeah.
Is that also happening in any other countries outside the UK? And if so, is there any successful sort of groups of Christianity that are succeeding?
Now, an interesting stat that I recently read, and I don't remember exactly the stat, so I'm just going to give you the synopsis, was across 16 prisons, they made a mark of how many people had converted to Islam and how many people had converted to Christianity across the same 16 prisons. Now, I'm going to make up the next two numbers because I cannot remember for the life of me what the actual numbers were, so these are more symbolic than actual of what the report said. But it was something like 265 people had converted to Islam. Bearing in mind that Islamist gangs are going around literally intimidating and harassing people to convert to Islam. Do you know how many people converted to Christianity in those same 16 prisons? 216. In other words, without the intimidation, without the harassment, Christians were still keeping track with the Muslims in terms of making converts. That tells you the difference between Islam and Christianity. Tells you that given a free choice, Christianity would come out on top. And the Muslims know that. That's why they have an apostasy law. Even one of their own scholars said that without the apostasy law, Islam would collapse. Yes. And we know that that's true. Because lots of Muslims are becoming Christians, because Muslims have lost the apostasy law, and Muslims don't feel as afraid to become Christian. Even in this crowd, I know someone who's from a Muslim family who's become a Christian. I know someone in this very crowd. And the Palestinian Ali, who doesn't believe in Muhammad, he's a Palestinian, clearly with a name called Ali. He was from a Muslim family, but he's saying he doesn't believe in Islam. So lots of Muslims are leaving Islam right now. Go on, sir. Thank you. No, all right.
Are you implying that conversions in the prison system are forced by any chance? And if they are, I think there might be one or two converts in the audience of that convert. If we were to bring one of them here, would you say that they were compelled otherwise? You also mentioned about the hostilities in the speaker's corner. If there were hostilities claimed, or I'm not sure because sometimes it does get a bit heated, would we observe hostilities now as well? Because it looks like there seems to be, from my part, friendly conversations taking place between Muslim groups, Christian groups, and atheistic groups. I don't see the violence that you're claiming. So just 2 points. One on the prison.
Okay, right. Let me address both. Yeah, let me address both points. I'll start with the second one. Right? In my 6 years at Speaker's Corner, I know about one person that receives an Osman warning who used to come to this corner. Do you know what an Osman warning is?
No.
It's when the police have credible intelligence that people are planning to kill you. He was a critic of Islam. Who do you think was trying to kill him? His milkman. Secondly, they tried to stab Hatun Tash to death in this park. She was a critic of Islam. Who do you think was trying to kill her? The Buddhists. They tried to set Dr. Banda on fire. Who do you think was trying to kill Dr. Banda? The Jews? I myself have been assaulted personally by 12 Muslims who set about me in a mob when a Muslim scholar lost a debate and he was on his crutches and we touched, and I must have given him miraculous healing, because the next minute I'm getting beaten up, my friends are getting beaten up, and this guy's running around, waving his crutches around, beating people over the head. I witnessed it, so the violence is there. I'm talking, you've made your point. So there's plenty of evidence, documented evidence, that you can see on Soko Films, Revelations 22, Bob of Speaker's Corner. It's there on camera. You can see it with your own eyes. Doesn't mean that from time to time the corner has a calm Sunday. But even today, we saw one guy chasing another guy around the park. Do you think they were playing tag? Second point. Am I saying that all converts to Islam in prison are by force? No. So I'm sure the brother can bring up some colonized African brother who's converted to Islam and he'll go, yep, I did it by choice. He's clearly invested because he's here doing dawah in the park, right? But does he think he's the only one that knows people from prison who converted to Islam? There are prisoners who, when they get shipped out of a Muslim-dominated prison, they spend a day or two looking around who's running the prison wing. And when they realize it's not Muslims, off comes the beard and out comes the bacon sandwiches. So the reality is, those converts were forced. And so it does happen, ladies and gentlemen. And just because there are counter-examples doesn't mean that it does not happen. Next question. Go on.
And his friend have been trying to get in touch with you because they've got something really interesting to share with you on walk in Islam. But we don't know how to get in touch with you. How can we do that?
Have you got a card? Yeah, this sister will give you a card. Just pass it to me and I'll pass it to them.
Cheers.
Yep. Next question, ladies and gentlemen. You wanted to do you want to debate? Okay, go on.
From myself, in Islam, being a Muslim, and most ideologies as well,
Thank you. Cheers.
being a Muslim and aware of most ideologies myself, there's always an extremist element in them.
Yep.
So you have that in Christianity as well, you have that in Islam, you have that from the Jews, you have that from the atheists, where every ideology has that fanatical sort of.
Yep.
Within the Muslims, we have a name for them. What we label the ISIS, what we label the extremists, and we call them.
Karaji.
We call them, as you know,
Karaji.
Khawarij. We call them Khawarij.
Yeah.
And when we give them that name, it comes from the word Kharaja, meaning those that have left the fold of Islam.
Yep.
And we label them within our own sector. We label them extremists. We label them fanatics.
Yep.
And we've been told to oppose them ourselves.
Yep.
So, and I'm more than I fully understand there will be some fanaticals. So within this speaker's corner, I'm aware of that. Would you? I'm not sure if your argument is that Islam as a general is like the Khawarij, the extreme Islam, which, by the way, it's a small minority and you get them in all groups.
Yep.
It's just that Islam has a political wing. So with them, they can show sort of force as well. They can control land like ISIS as well. And they do.
Come to your question, sir.
My point was this: would you agree that perhaps you're conflating the extremist groups that might go around wanting to butcher and kill and stab, and you've got maybe, I assume, 1 in 100 here like that?
And your question?
And are you conflating that with the average sort of Muslim that might not have that, because you have Sufi groups in Islam that
Yep. Okay,
sort of
I understand the question.
purification,
Yeah.
and they, as far as I'm aware, take up the bulk of Islam.
Yeah, I understand the question.
The
Yeah.
the second one
No, one question. No, right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to agree with the brother that Muslims are not one homogeneous blob. And I hopefully have been clear that I said Islamists. I didn't say Muslims.
Would you switch to Khawarij?
No, let me finish. Please don't interrupt. Show some manners. Now, nobody else interrupted you. Right. So, I agree with the brother that there isn't an homogeneous blob called Muslims. And I want to advise you all to be careful with your use of language, because nothing undermines our argument more than clumsy uses of language. Muslims are not a united group. They are separated by different sects. Those sects themselves are separated into different groups. And then the Muslims themselves sit upon levels of different intensity of commitment. And they're not all equally committed, and their ideology is not all the same. And so the brother is quite right to point out that distinction. And I agree with him. And I oppose Islamists and Islamist ideology. However, since he brought it up, let me expand my critique to Islam in general. Please know, I still did not say Muslims in general, but Islam in general. Because he mentioned ISIS, and he said, and I'm going to mispronounce it because Arabic is not my first language. I have not been Arabized. The Khawarij. Did I get that right? Close enough? Yeah? And he labeled ISIS Khawarij. But can you identify actions that ISIS did that the Ottoman Empire did not do? Because the Ottoman Empire is considered a mainstream Islamic caliphate. ISIS enslaved people. The Ottomans enslaved people. ISIS desecrated and destroyed churches. The Ottomans desecrated and destroyed churches. ISIS kidnapped Christian women and children. The Ottomans kidnapped Christian women and children. ISIS waged war on its non-Muslim neighbors. The Ottomans waged war on its non-Muslim neighbors. ISIS was committed to the doctrine of perpetual jihad. The Ottomans were committed to the doctrine of perpetual jihad. ISIS had a caliphate. The Ottomans had a caliphate. ISIS had Islamic judges and jurists. The Ottomans had Islamic judges and jurists. In what way was ISIS different from the Ottomans? None. Except in particular internal points of Islamic fiqh. You've got to go deep into Islam before you start identifying the difference between the Khawarij and the rest of the Muslims. And it's on such a nuanced point that for the rest of us non-Muslims, it makes no practical difference at all. Now, do most Muslims know about that? No. Do most Muslims even follow Islam? No. And thank God they don't. Because if they did, things would be a lot worse. Islam is the problem. Christianity is the answer. Any other questions? Let someone else ask a question. Or alternatively, just come and debate. All right, so any other questions?
So have a debate. Have a debate if you want to.
Do you have another card? Any other questions going once? Any other questions going twice? Last chance, guys. Any gone? No, we're asking questions on Islamist gangs in prison. Well, actually, no, I'm going to give it to you because yeah, he was off topic. Go on.
So she misgendered someone who was a convicted pedophile.
Yeah.
Who came to the NHS and he called her the N-word because he was transgender. They disciplined her.
Yeah.
And now there's a petition against the NHS.
So there you go. To all my black brothers and sisters, you now know that in the economics of intersectionality, racism ranks as a lesser crime than being transphobic. The Christian nurse, a black Christian nurse, misgendered a trans individual by the wrong gender. I don't know whether it was a man to woman or woman to man thing. But in response, this individual called her the N-word a few times. And the response of the NHS was to sanction her. Guaranteed, if I gave a racist, and quite rightly so, if I gave a racist outburst in a hospital, they'd just refuse me treatment. But apparently, if you're trans, because on the intersectional scale you're more victimized, you can actually get away with even racism. Now, I'm talking, sir. Have some manners. No, have some manners. Wait. Put your hand up. So, ladies and gentlemen, this Christian nurse is now fighting for her job because she can tell the difference between a man and a woman. A similar crime that a 2-year-old committed recently and was suspended from nursery for doing so. The problem is that our elites have gone mad with their gooey, goopy nonsense where they are literally calling evil good and good evil, and where They are saying that up is down and down is up. And we as Christians, as our sister has done, are the group that stands in the gap, because as Christians we do not live by lies, even if those lies are politically correct. And there are a lot of lies that are governing our politics right now, such as transgender ideology. As Christians, we should rally to this nurse's cause. We should support her. We should protest tactfully outside of the hospital. And I emphasize tactfully because it is a hospital. We should protest what has happened to her, and we should demand that her job be reinstated and that she be given, if she hasn't already, full pay back to the time that she was suspended, and that all charges be dropped and her record be wiped clean. Now you can ask a question if you want. No, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, Bob, if I can go back to my initial question I asked you, out of respect, I said nothing, but I'm going to disagree with you. And I'll tell you why I disagree with you.
Fair enough.
The basis of the question related to Tommy Robinson being incarcerated, and I mentioned civil.
Yes.
I think you focused on the civil.
Yeah.
The issue is, the government has argued the reason he's in segregation is because his life has been threatened by Islamists.
Right, there we go.
I should have made that
Yeah,
clear,
that now makes it clear, yeah. So, for example, we were talking about Islamist gangs operating in prison. As if you needed evidence, go and look up the story of Tommy Robinson. Loathe him or love him should make no difference. It is an evidential case to the threat posed by Islamist gangs. Tommy Robinson is in prison for a civil, not a criminal offence. And he is in prison and has been put in isolation because his life is under threat by the very Islamist gangs that we've been talking about, ladies and gentlemen. And so, if you want evidence to what I've been saying, go and read up on why he's been kept in isolation for over 120 days, which in any other circumstance would be considered torture. Why not just put the man under house arrest? Stick him in his home and say he's got to be back. He can't leave until 8 in the morning, and he's got to be back at 7 at 9. He's got, apparently, if you've got an alt-left government and you're a right-wing activist, you don't get to have the same rights as an Islamist. Next question.
Wait, sorry. You said Islamist? Wait, what's the point of his religion that he would use on that? If he's like a black British guy, would he be like, oh, black people don't have the same rights as like...
What's your question, bro?
No, I just didn't get your example. What does like his religion have to do with... Like,
If you had talked less and listened more, you would have heard the reason for the example.
okay, so clarification question. Why does his religion play a role in that, I'm like...
Like what?
Like, the difference between how he's treated.
Who's treated?
The right-wing activist, as you just said, and...
I never said that. So, I never said that. Okay, next question.
Okay, sorry, I was slow down,
Yeah, you should pay attention. Next question.
I'm locked in now. Do I get another question?
Go on.
Can you explain what a dhimmi is?
Yeah. Peace, way, bro. How are you doing, brother? Look after yourself. So, what is a dhimmi? A dhimmi is a second-class citizen in an Islamic state. A second-class citizen in an Islamic state is called a dhimmi because under Sharia law, they are being protected. Now, an intelligent person might want to ask, protected from what? We think that the state protects us. And so we are protected by our state. But imagine living in a country where when you're called protected, what they mean is you're protected from the state you live in. Now we have another name for that. It's called a protection racket. It's when you go up to a shop owner and you say to the shop owner, this is a rough area, bro, but if you give me £500, I'll make sure that nobody steals from your shop, nobody robs your shop, nobody smashes your windows, and no graffiti happens on your boardings. And then you go, no, it's all right. And then the guy who's made you this offer says, oh, and by the way, if you don't pay me the 500, I'll be coming back to rob you, I'll be coming back to smash your windows, I'll be coming back to graffiti. That's the life of a dhimmi. Under Sharia law, Christians become second-class citizens. We can't build new churches. We can't repair old ones. Our lives are valued as less than that of our Muslim equivalents. We don't have equality under the law in terms of what we can buy or sell or who we can marry. We have to wear clothes that mark us out and distinguish us as Christians so that everyone can spot, oh, there's the Christian walking down the street. Just like when the Nazis made the Jews wear the Star of David. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's what a dhimmi is. Now let me ask you, if you're a Christian, how many of you think that that's a good offer and you want to be a dhimmi? If you don't want it, then you're obliged to oppose Islamization. Next question. It is precisely an apartheid system. The alt-left would oppose an apartheid system if it was based on race. And let's applaud them because that's noble. That's good. That's what you should do. But if it's a religious apartheid system where Christians are the victims and Muslims are the perpetrators, then the alt-left turns a blind eye. And that's the narrative that we have to break in our culture. Any other question? Any other question going once? Any other question going twice? Any other question going 3 and final times? Okay, we're done. No, you talk the whole time, bro. Tough. You should have. I gave it tough. Bro, I gave you 3 times. Did everyone hear me say 3 times? You need to. You said, I'm locked in. And then 30 seconds later, you were talking again. And you spent the whole time talking. Then just call me a shit teacher and move on. Right. It's probably been another theft or a... Yeah, another one being chased by the milkman. But the thing is, what they're doing is that you've got... I think what's happening is they're snatching people's phones. I think. I don't know. Well, I've got one more talk, but go on.
This is a sincere question.
Yeah, because he was listening.
What is we are all made in the image of God mean? Because clearly we all look different.
Yep.
Clearly we have different two genders, male and female.
Yeah.
Clearly it's not in my mind, a philosophical thing because God is perfect and I'm not. I'm
Yep.
only a sinner.
Yep.
I recognise that. So what does it mean?
It's a great question and a fair one. And the Christian answer to this question actually sits on a spectrum. So there are some Christians that actually think that the normative shape of a human being is in some way reflective of the image of God. That in some way God actually has this kind of shape that is both male and female, because obviously we both share a similar shape. But I don't go along with that. For me, how I understand the image of God, it is that God is a creator and we are a procreator. God is creative and we can be creative, that God has reason and that we have reason, that we can embody the nobilities that are intrinsic to God, that with cooperation with the Holy Spirit, that we can embody them ourselves. Because in some very diminutive way, they're already present within us. They're created with us. And that inner compass that is drawn towards God and drawn towards truth, because God is truth, is because we are in God's image. Now, the thing about an image is that it obviously isn't a perfect representation. Like, I'm sure you've seen videos of me, probably on a little screen, maybe as small as your phone. That image of me is probably that big. Well, clearly I'm not that big. And it's flat, it's two-dimensional. Clearly I'm three-dimensional. But if you showed that image to someone and knew me and said, that's Bob, everyone would go, yeah, that's Bob. So that image is recognizable as mine. And so our image of God is not in any way a true representation of God's image, but in some way, and in the ways that I've tried to describe, the idea of the virtues that we can embody, our creativity, our role as governor of the earth, the fact that we have a place to govern the earth, yeah? Like this kind of image that we have, is something that we can call the image of God. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. I'm going to go on to my next topic.